Imagine an astronaut floating up there in the International Space Station.
Right.
When you picture that, you probably think about, zero gravity or freeze-dried food or those incredible views of Earth out the window.
Oh, yeah, it really is like the ultimate human adventure.
Hmm.
But there's this hidden physiological cost to that adventure that most people never see.
Right, because beneath the surface, something pretty alarming is actually happening. Every single month that an astronaut is up there in microgravity, they are losing about 1 to 1.5% of their bone density.
Which is just a staggering loss when you put it into terrestrial perspective. I mean, that is roughly the same amount of bone loss that a postmenopausal woman here on Earth might experience over an entire year.
Wait, a whole year's worth of bone loss in just 30 days?
Exactly. 30 days.
That is wild. And it begs this massive question, right? Like, why does simply floating in space cause your skeleton to just dissolve?
It's a great question, and the answer to it completely shatters how most of us view our own bodies.
Yeah, because we tend to think of our bones as this dead scaffolding, like the wooden frame of a house that just sits there.
Right, just a static structure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But today, our mission for this deep dive is to look at the anatomy and physiology that proves the exact opposite. Your bones are highly dynamic, living organs that constantly rebuild themselves based entirely on how much you use them.
Yeah, and to really grasp how that rebuilding process works, we need to separate two biological concepts that often get, well, jumbled together.
Okay, what are they?
Growth and remodeling. So growth is a developmental process. It has a hard stopping point,
Like when you hit a certain age?
right? You reach a certain age, your bones reach their final length, and you are officially done growing. Remodeling, on the other hand, is a lifelong maintenance process.
So that's the one that just keeps going.
Exactly. It is the constant tearing down and rebuilding of the bone tissue. That mechanism never stops, from the day you were born to the day you die.
Okay, so let's start with the blueprint then. Because before we can understand how bones rebuild themselves in space, or, how they repair wear and tear as we age, we have to understand how they get there in the first place.
Right, because a skeleton doesn't just magically appear fully formed in the womb.
Obviously not, yeah.
No, it doesn't. So the process of building bone from scratch is called ossification. And the human body actually has two entirely different pathways for getting that done.
Two different ways to build bone.
Yeah, exactly. The first one is called intramembranous ossification.
Intramembranous, so meaning like within a membrane.
Essentially, yes. It means building bone directly from embryonic connective tissue. It basically skips any intermediate steps.
Oh, so it just goes straight to bone.
Right. The embryonic cells just congregate, they condense, and they start secreting this soft, unmineralized bone matrix. And then eventually that calcifies and hardens.
Okay, so where does the body actually use this direct method?
It uses it for the flat bones of your skull, your jaw, and your collarbones.
Which perfectly explains a phenomenon that terrifies almost anyone who has ever held a newborn baby.
Oh, the soft spots.
Yeah, those soft spots in the top of their head.
Right, the fontanelles. Those soft patches exist precisely because this intramembranous ossification process is still ongoing when a baby is born.
Like it literally hasn't finished baking yet.
Exactly. The bone hasn't finished mineralizing. And there's a brilliant evolutionary reason for that. It allows the skull plates to shift and flex so the baby can actually make it through the birth canal.
Oh, wow.
And it provides room for the brain to rapidly expand during those first few months of life.
That is incredible design. But that direct method is only for the skull and collarbones, right? What about the rest of the body, like the arms, the legs, the ribs?
Yeah, so for almost everything else, that includes all your long bones, the body uses the second pathway, which is called endochondral ossification.
Endochondral. Okay.
And this one is fascinating because it relies on a middleman. The body can't just build a long, complex bone out of nowhere. So it first builds a complete model of the future bone out of cartilage.
Wait, like a rough draft.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a flexible, temporary template.
So we basically start out as little cartilage models.
We do.
Yeah.
And cartilage is great because it can expand from within very quickly. So once that template is formed, blood vessels start to invade the cartilage.
Okay. And I'm guessing that changes things.
Big time. The arrival of the blood supply changes the whole environment. The cartilage cells begin to die off, which leaves these empty spaces.
Oh, I see.
And then specialized bone-building cells ride in on those blood vessels to lay down actual hard bone matrix in the void.
So the bone literally chases the cartilage out.
That's a really great way to picture it, actually. This replacement process starts in the very center of the bone shaft before you're even born.
Okay.
And over the years, It spreads outward toward the ends of the bone. But the body leaves this crucial little strip of unossified cartilage near the ends of the long bones.
Hold on, is that the growth plate? I feel like I always hear about kids injuring their growth plate.
Yes, exactly. The epiphyseal plate. This is the engine of all longitudinal bone growth.
So that's how we get taller.
Right. And if you look at this tiny strip of cartilage under a microscope, it's operating like like a four-zone assembly line.
Okay, walk me through the assembly line.
First, there's a reserve zone of quiet, resting cartilage cells just waiting their turn,
Just chilling.
just chilling.
Yeah.
Then a proliferative zone where those cells wake up, rapidly divide, and they stack up like rolls of coins.
Oh, wow.
And that stacking action is what physically pushes the ends of the bone further apart, which adds length to the limb.
Wait, so the cartilage is doing the actual lengthening, not the bone.
Correct. The cartilage grows, and then the bone chases it. So in the third zone, the hypertrophic zone, those stacked cells swell up massively and die off, leaving behind these thin, calcified struts.
Okay, and the fourth zone.
Finally, in the calcification zone, the bone-building cells swoop in, clear out the dead cartilage struts, and replace them with true bone.
So it's a continuous conveyor belt. Cartilage being created on one side and turning into bone on the other.
Exactly. It's incredibly dynamic.
That is wildly complex. It's not just, bone growing. It's this intricate relay race.
Yeah, and medical professionals can actually read where a child is in that relay race.
Really?
How? Well, pediatricians will often take a bone age X-ray of a child's wrist and compare it to these standardized reference books, like the Grulich-Pyle Atlas.
Okay, I've heard of bone age tests.
Right, and by looking at exactly how much of that cartilage plate has been replaced by bone, they can remarkably accurately estimate what that child's final adult height will be.
Because eventually the bone-building cells catch up to the cartilage, right? Like the cartilage stops dividing.
Exactly. When the cartilage is completely replaced by bone, the plates fuse. That usually happens in your late teens or 20s, and it signals the permanent end of getting taller.
But getting taller can't be the whole story. I mean, if our bones only got longer, they'd just snap under our own body weight as we grew into adults.
Oh, absolutely.
They have to get wider too, right?
They do. And that widening process is called appositional growth.
Yeah.
And it requires a very, very delicate balancing act.
Okay, how so?
You have cells on the outer surface of the bone, laying down new layers, adding girth. But if the body only added material to the outside, your bones would become incredibly dense, incredibly heavy, and completely metabolically exhausting to carry around.
Right, because bone is super heavy stuff. To help visualize this, I was actually thinking about it like upgrading the plumbing in an old house.
Oh, I like where this is going.
Yeah, imagine you have a pipe that's too narrow for the water flow, but instead of ripping the whole thing out, you just build a wider, thicker pipe around the outside of the old one.
Right, okay.
But if you stop there, the pipe is huge and really heavy. But if you send a demolition crew inside the pipe to simultaneously scrape away the inner walls, the pipe gets wider overall, the wall thickness stays proportional, and you don't add a ton of unnecessary weight.
That is a perfect analogy. I mean, in the bone, you have building cells on the outside, which is the periosteum adding width, and then you have demolition cells on the inside, the endosteum, simultaneously hollowing out the marrow cavity.
That is so cool.
It's a highly synchronized effort to increase the bone's diameter and strength while keeping your overall weight manageable.
Okay, so eventually we hit our 20s, those growth plates fuse, and longitudinal growth officially stops. But if the skeleton is a living organ, it can't just shut down.
Right. It doesn't.
I mean, we're going to be walking, running, and putting stress on those bones for the next 60 years. They'd just slowly crumble without some kind of repair mechanism.
And that biological necessity leads us right into the lifelong renovation project, which is remodeling.
The constant turnover.
Right. Now, historically, the scientific community didn't actually realize this was happening. Back in 1691, an English physician named Clopton Havers looked at bone under a microscope and discovered these tiny canals running through it.
Yeah, the Haversian canals.
Exactly. But he was basically studying stack anatomy. The assumption was that bone was just inert scaffolding. You build a skyscraper, the steel girders go up, and they just sit there forever.
Just a structural frame.
Right. It wasn't until much later in the mid-20th century with the work of researchers like Harold Frost that the modern realization really took hold.
Which is that bone is metabolically active tissue.
Yes. It is an organ system that self-renews, much like your skin shedding dead cells or your gut lining replacing itself. It just operates on a much, much slower time scale.
And the microscopic crews doing this self-renewal, they're called basic multicellular units, right? Or BMUs.
Yes, BMUs.
What does that demolition and construction site actually look like in real time? Like, what are they doing?
So at any given moment, you have millions of these tiny BMU sites active across your skeleton. They operate in a strict four-phase cycle: activation, resorption, reversal, and formation.
Okay, let's break those down. Activation first.
Right. Starts with activation. Deep inside the bone matrix are these cells called osteocytes. Think of them as the site managers or sensors.
Okay, the sensors.
They detect a microscopic crack in the bone, maybe from you just going for a jog, and they send out a chemical signal to recruit the demolition crew.
The demolition crew being a different type of cell.
Yes, the osteoclasts. So once they arrive, we enter the resorption phase. Osteoclasts are these large, specialized cells that latch onto the bone surface, create a tight seal, and literally secrete acid and enzymes to dissolve both the mineral and protein structures of the bone.
Wow, they literally melt it.
Yeah, and they work quite fast. It only takes them about 2 to 3 weeks to excavate a microscopic pit in the bone.
Let me stop you there for a second, because when I first learned about this, it seemed completely counterintuitive.
Oh, I know.
Like, why do we have cells roaming around our bodies spraying acid to destroy our own skeleton? Aren't they doing damage?
Yeah, it's a very common reaction to view the osteoclasts as the villains of the story, like they're just destroying things.
Exactly.
But they are absolutely vital. Think about a cracked foundation in a house. You can't just pour new cement over crumbling concrete. You have to chisel out the damaged material first.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right. Osteoclasts clear out the microdamage that naturally accumulates from daily living. Furthermore, by dissolving that bone, they release crucial calcium reserves into your bloodstream.
Wait, our blood needs calcium.
Oh, desperately. Your body needs that calcium circulating for vital minute-to-minute functions, like nerve signaling and keeping your heart beating.
So they aren't just breaking things, they're clearing the way for repairs and keeping our nervous system alive.
Exactly. Without them, you're in severe trouble. In fact, there's a rare genetic disorder called osteopetrosis, where the osteoclasts fail to function properly.
What happens then?
Well, because nothing is ever torn down, the bones become incredibly thick and dense on an X-ray.
That sounds like it would make you super strong, no?
Paradoxically, no. They become as brittle as chalk. Because all that unrepaired microdamage just accumulates, the bones completely lose their flexibility and are highly prone to shattering.
Wow. Okay, so we definitely need the demolition crew, so they clear out the damaged bone for a few weeks. Then how does it actually get fixed?
That brings us to reversal, which is a brief handoff phase where the demolition stops, and then new chemical signals attract the builders to the freshly excavated pit.
The builders are the osteoblasts, right?
Yes, osteoblasts. They initiate the formation phase, where they settle into the pit and start secreting fresh, new, unmineralized bone matrix. But unlike the fast-moving demolition crew, the builders are slow and methodical.
How slow are we talking?
It takes them 3 to 4 months to fully fill the pit and harden the new bone.
Weeks to tear it down, but months to rebuild it.
Exactly.
You know, I feel like this constant cycle is where that famous trivia fact comes from, the one that says, like, your entire skeleton is replaced every 7 years.
Ah, yes.
Huh.
It's a very fun fact, but it's a massive oversimplification.
Is it?
Yeah, the truth is that different architectures of bone turn over at wildly different rates.
Yeah.
Spongy trabecular bone, the honeycomb-like stuff you find in your spine or the ends of your joints, has a massive surface area exposed to blood vessels.
Okay, so that turns over fast.
Right. Parts of that might turn over entirely in just 3 or 4 years.
But not the solid parts.
No. The dense, compact cortical bones, the thick walls of your arm and leg bones, that can take a decade or more to turn over.
Oh, all decade.
Yeah. And there are some deep internal rings of that cortical bone that may barely turn over at all during your entire lifetime.
Yeah.
So that 7-year rule is really just a blended average that obscures the fascinating reality of how targeted the process is.
Which brings up a huge logical question for me. You have millions of these construction sites happening. Right?
Millions, yeah.
How do they know where to work? I mean, they aren't just operating randomly. There has to be some sort of blueprint dictating where to add structural support and where to let it dissolve.
That is the core of how our skeleton adapts to our environment. In 1892, a German anatomist named Julius Wolff noticed that the internal spongy architecture of bone looked exactly like the mathematical stress trajectory diagrams that engineers were using to build iron bridges.
Wait, really? Like the actual struts of a bridge?
Exactly like them. So he proposed what became known as Wolff's Law, which states that bone adapts to the mechanical loads placed upon it.
Just like an engineer adding more steel to the part of the bridge taking the most wind or weight. But I actually read that Wolff's math was a bit off.
He was conceptually brilliant, but his specific claims about bone perfectly mirroring idealized mathematical lines were an oversimplification.
Okay, so the math was wrong, but the idea was right.
Exactly. The core concept survived and was heavily refined in the late 20th century by Harold Frost, who developed the mechanostat theory.
The mechanostat, like a thermostat in your hallway, but for mechanical stress.
That's the exact idea. Frost proposed that those deeply buried site managers, the osteocytes, act as a mechanical set point.
The sensors we talked about earlier.
Right. Because they are embedded in the bone fluid, they can physically feel the microscopic strain and bending of the bone when you move.
Oh, they can actually feel the bending.
Yes. If the physical strain goes above a certain threshold, the osteocytes trigger the builders, the osteoblasts, to lay down more bone to handle the load.
And if the strain drops?
If it drops below a certain threshold, meaning you aren't using the bone, they trigger the demolition crew, the osteoclasts, to dissolve the excess bone to conserve metabolic energy.
Okay, one of the most mind-blowing examples of this in the research is orthodontics. I feel like anyone who has ever had braces has experienced this firsthand.
Absolutely. It's the mechanostat in action. When an orthodontist tightens braces, the wire applies a very slow, sustained mechanical pressure to the tooth. On the side of the root being pushed into the jawbone, the osteocytes sense that high compression, and so they signal the osteoclasts to dissolve the bone there, which creates an empty space for the tooth to move into.
Like an icebreaker ship carving a path forward.
Yes, exactly. And on the opposite side of the root, where the connective ligaments are being stretched and pulled away from the bone, the tension triggers the osteoblasts to build new bone, filling in the wake behind the tooth.
So over months, your body is literally remodeling the architecture of your jawbone to accommodate the pressure of the braces.
It's just phenomenal, isn't it?
It is, and it makes so much practical sense. Like when a doctor tells you to lift weights to improve your bone density, it's not because your bones are physically absorbing the iron from the dumbbells.
No, definitely not.
It's because lifting heavy things intentionally strains the skeleton, which hits that thermostat and forces the osteocytes to order more structural scaffolding.
It's all about providing the mechanical demand.
But we still have a missing link here. We know the mechanical stress is the physical trigger, right?
Right. How do the cells actually talk to each other? Like, how does a physical bend in the bone get translated into a chemical work order for a demolition crew?
So the discovery of that chemical communication layer in the late 1990s completely revolutionized bone biology. It's called the Rankol-Rankopg axis.
Okay, that is some heavy alphabet soup right there.
It is.
Can we break that down? How does the switch actually work?
Sure, let's picture the cells. The osteoblasts, the building cells, display a specific protein on their outer surface called ANCO-L.
Okay, ANCO.
You can think of Ranko as the ultimate go signal. When a builder cell bumps into a pre-osteoclast, like a baby demolition cell, that ANCO protein binds to a receptor on the demolition cell.
Oh, so they literally touch.
Yes. That physical connection is the switch. It tells the demolition cell to mature, fuse together, and start destroying bone.
So the builders are the ones who actually hold the leash to the demolition crew. They give the order to start destruction.
They do, but it gets even more elegant. The builders also have a brake pedal. They can secrete a protein called OPG. OPG, what does that do?
OPG is essentially a decoy receptor that floats around in the surrounding fluid.
Okay, I think I've got an analogy for this. Tell me if this works.
Let's hear.
NCL is like a VIP pass that gets the demolition crew into the nightclub to start the party. But OPG is like a team of bouncers hired by the builders.
Okay.
The bouncers roam around the line outside the club, intercepting and confiscating the VIP passes before the demolition crew can even use them. So the more bouncers you release, the less demolition happens inside the club.
I love that. It's a perfect visualization. By changing the ratio of VIP passes, the RNKL to the bouncers, the OPG, your body sets the exact rate of bone turnover for your entire skeleton on any given day.
That is so clever. And once scientists figured out this bouncer system, pharmaceutical companies realized they could hack it, right?
They certainly did. Modern osteoporosis drugs like denosumab are essentially synthetic, injectable versions of those bouncers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they flood the system, mop up all the VIP passes, and aggressively shut down the demolition crew, halting bone loss in its tracks.
But hacking a biological system doesn't always go perfectly. And that brings us to the cautionary tale of this deep dive.
Right, the bisphosphonates.
Yeah, bisphosphonates and atypical femoral fractures.
It's a very sobering chapter in medical history. Before we had the synthetic bouncers, doctors relied heavily on an older class of drugs called bisphosphonates to treat osteoporosis.
How did those work?
Well, instead of intercepting a signal, these drugs physically bind to the bone mineral itself. When an osteoclast arrives and tries to dissolve that bone, it ingests the drug, is poisoned, and dies.
So it just straight up kills the demolition crew.
Yes. This forcefully stops remodeling, which preserves bone mass. For a long time, it was hailed as an absolute miracle.
Until doctors started noticing something terrifying in emergency rooms.
Yes. In the mid-2000s, patients who had been taking these drugs for 5, sometimes 10 years, started showing up with catastrophic fractures right in the middle of their femur.
Which is the thickest, strongest bone in the human thigh.
Exactly. And these weren't from car crashes. These were low-trauma fractures.
Yeah.
A patient might just be stepping off a curb or standing in their kitchen, and their femur would simply snap in half.
How does a drug designed to protect the skeleton cause the biggest bone in the body to just break from standing still?
It goes right back to the microdamage we discussed earlier. The femur takes an immense amount of mechanical stress every time you take a step.
Right.
Normally, the BMU construction crews constantly fix the microscopic cracks that form. But by permanently poisoning the demolition crew, these drugs suppress the remodeling process too well.
Oh, so the microscopic cracks were never chiseled out.
Never. Over years, thousands of tiny, unrepaired cracks accumulated, merged together, and created a massive stress fault until the bone just gave way.
That is the ultimate irony. We are so conditioned to equate bone density with bone strength. But this proves that density isn't everything.
No, not at all.
Like if the bone is super thick and dense, but it's riddled with unrepaired microscopic cracks because we fired the entire demolition crew, it's actually incredibly weak.
Exactly. It completely changed the standard of care. The FDA added severe warnings, and now doctors routinely enforce drug holidays.
Meaning they stop the medication for a bit.
Right, taking patients off the medication for a year or two so their natural remodeling cycle can wake up and clear out the accumulated structural damage.
Which really highlights a huge ongoing debate in the biology community right now, doesn't it? Like, is this remodeling process primarily a targeted emergency 911 response to specific damage? Or is it just a random routine turnover process that just happens to sweep up damage along the way?
What's known as stochastic turnover. And the current consensus is that it's a bit of both. The mechanicism clearly directs targeted repair where physical strain is highest.
Okay, but there's also the random element.
Yes, there is also a baseline level of random turnover happening everywhere, constantly, just to prevent the organic proteins in the bone from getting old and brittle. Understanding the interplay between those two systems is the cutting edge of the field today.
Wow. Let's step back and look at the big picture here. Because understanding this physiology fundamentally changes how you should treat your own body.
It really does.
Your skeleton isn't just a calcium bank account that you are slowly draining as you age. It is a dynamic, living system constantly reading its environment.
Which means simply swallowing a calcium pill every morning isn't going to save your bones.
Right.
Calcium is just the raw material. It's the bricks sitting on the construction site.
Right.
If you want to actually build strong bone, you have to provide the mechanical loading through exercise and movement to trigger the mechanostat.
You have to give the osteocytes a reason to demand the calcium.
Exactly. And of course, you need adequate vitamin D just to absorb that calcium from your diet in the first place.
Use it or lose it, literally.
Yeah.
Which brings us all the way back to the start of our deep dive, our astronaut floating in microgravity, losing a year's worth of bone in a single month.
Right. They don't have Earth's gravity providing that constant mechanical strain.
So their mechanostat assumes they are paralyzed, right? So it orders the demolition crew to start dismantling the heavy scaffolding to conserve energy.
The body is being highly efficient, but it's operating in the wrong environment.
But based on everything we've uncovered today, I want to leave you with a provocative thought. If the massive bone loss in space is just a reaction to a lack of mechanical loading,
Right.
and if the Rankel-Uppy pathway is essentially just a chemical switch, could we eventually invent a way to chemically trick the mechanostat?
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
Right. Could scientists develop a therapy that tells the osteocytes they're under the crushing strain of Earth's gravity even while they are floating halfway to Mars?
If they could figure that out.
Because if we solve that, if we can safely manipulate the skeleton's set point without shutting down the vital repair process, it wouldn't just unlock long-duration space travel. It could be the key to completely eradicating osteoporosis right here on Earth.